Bodhisattvas. When I talk about these, they're not distant to me anymore. They're my friends. So I hope they come a little closer for you. We're talking about Manjushri today, and I was on the way out the door. I wasn't going to bring a metal statue because I have a few pictures. But she, well, I call her she, but they say he's a he, but what do they know? Let's
call them they.
They. These days you can just they. Let me put it up close for you guys, and then you can come up and look at them more closely. My story, as with most things in Buddhism, it seems to me my story often is I didn't like them in the beginning. I just thought when I was little, they told me that I used to say I like peas, no. I couldn't quite get out the no, but I got it out the end. So maybe I spent the rest of my life saying I like Manjushri, no. But Manjushri, Manjushri came into my heart at a hard time in my life was fine, but there was something that was really troubling me, a situation which I can't say is resolved at this point at all, but I was so clear that it wasn't going to resolve itself by turning out the way I wanted it to turn out, like many things. And Manjushri became my friend to help me see more clearly, because Manjushri is the bodhisattva of wisdom and insight and cuts through duality. I was thinking, someone said in a meeting last week that I was in, the question was what do you do when you're tangled up and you're caught in stuff? And one person said he remembered what Gil Fronsdale says, who's a Vipassana teacher, and Gil says no story, which is another way to say cut through the story. No story. It's not like don't dissociate, but come close. So I'm going to talk about Manjushri, but when I got this statue of Manjushri, I got Manjushri to help me, because I didn't know how to, and I still don't know how to cut through an ongoing situation that I find difficult, but I love everybody involved in it. And Manjushri sits right at my kitchen sink on the altar, just above my kitchen sink, so that I see Manjushri every day. So Manjushri is my good friend amongst other good friends. I'm going to read you from Taigen's book, because I like the way he says things, and I really respect Taigen a lot. Manjushri, master of emptiness and wisdom. Manjushri is the bodhisattva of wisdom and insight, penetrating into the fundamental emptiness, universal sameness, and the true nature of all things. Manjushri, whose name means noble, gentle one. Now, I want to say that maybe you had this experience. It's not like I haven't studied or taught about Manjushri before. But when I go back, it's always like, it's like if you go back and you meet an old friend, you keep looking and seeing and hearing things, and it goes in a different way. So I feel like I'm meeting Manjushri all over again, because Manjushri often carries a sword, which can, and this Manjushri carries a flaming sword, muddy flames. Oh no. But Manjushri is known as the noble, gentle one. Manjushri doesn't cut through delusion with that kind of energy, but with nobility and gentleness, and sees into the essence of each phenomenal event. This essential nature is not a thing. This essential nature is that not a thing has any fixed existence separate in itself, independent from the whole world around it. Nothing has any inherent self-existence. We know this. Nothing has any inherent self-existence. Yeah, well, when you're tangled up in something, it sure feels like you're a self and there's another self over there. And I mean, we know, I can feel the wisdom of everything's interconnected and flowing in and out of everything else. But when I'm in my stuff, it sure doesn't feel that way. The work of wisdom is to see through the illusory self-other dichotomy, our imagined estrangement from our world. Our imagined estrangement from our world. It's like, I'm over here, you're over there. And generally, you're doing something to me. Studying the self in this life, Manjushri's flashing awareness realizes the deeper, vast quality of self, liberated from all our commonly unquestioned, fabricated characteristics. So Gil's no story is usually our stories are unquestioned and they're completely fabricated because, well, I mean, there's truth to it, but I mean, I don't know about you, but my stories are usually have at least some element of fabrication and self-righteousness in them, especially the ones that I'm tangled up in. With their relentless commitment to uncovering ultimate reality, Manjushri embodies and represents the paramita of prajna. I don't know if I've been saying it here, I've been saying wherever I've been saying. The word prajna has just been enchanting me. Prajna is the most beautiful word to say. Prajna feels to me like it's breath and it's gentle and it prajna. So the paramita, Manjushri embodies and represents the paramita of prajna, the perfection of wisdom, both as a practice and as the body of sutras so named. There's the Heart Sutra, which we're going to study during practice period, is of the prajna paramita 100, I think it's 100,000 million. In fact, I just remember somebody gave me in a drawer, I have a stack of the 100,000 prajna paramita sutras, which I should get out and put on the altar, and I should bring them here so we could see them. I forgot I had that. Although Manjushri is especially associated with the emptiness teaching and the Madhyamaka branch of Mahayana teachings, I want us to study Madhyamaka someday. I'm going to challenge myself to study Madhyamaka, but not right now, but we will. Now, he is not present in the earliest of the Prajna Paramita Sutras, but Manjushri is one of the most prominent bodhisattvas in all of the Mahayana Sutras, and is sometimes considered to be based on the historical person associated with Shakyamuni Buddha. One of the earliest bodhisattvas, Manjushri was popular in India by the 4th century, if not earlier, and was included in the first depictions of a bodhisattva pantheon in the 5th and 6th centuries. So Manjushri's been around for a while. Good to have old wise friends. Images of Manjushri appeared in Japan by the early 8th century. Insight involves going within, seeing the fundamental. This energy exemplified by Manjushri is about pulling wisdom out of the depth of oneself. Pulling wisdom out of the depth of oneself. About being an open channel for the awakening of Buddhahood to express itself. Manjushri's wisdom arises not from external knowledge or accomplishment, but out of concentrated inner vision. Hence, we'll find out. Maybe I'll add now that Manjushri is often the central figure in the meditation hall. So if you go to Green Gulch, it was in the newsletter, and if you go to Green Gulch, or maybe you can see if you see this if I hold it, the statue in the Green Gulch Buddha Hall is just extraordinarily beautiful. And so it is so noble and graceful and gentle. There's some over there on the table, not a lot, but if you wanted to take one home, it's like it's not like I know something. It's like wisdom that just kind of illuminates with grace and ease. So the iconography of Manjushri is these bodhisattvas often ride on animals. The Buddha is often associated with the lion and the lion's roar. I have a lion on my bed. I have to confess. In fact, when I was a little girl, my most favorite stuffy was a lion. It makes me really happy when I remember that. I don't remember who gave me that stuffy, but I like lions. So Manjushri often rides a lion of nobility and fearlessness. Yields the Vajra sword, usually in the right hand, to cut through entanglements of ignorance and cutting through all doubt and confusion. It's like, what's really true here? What's really important here? It says sometimes the sword can give or take life. Like, don't just go picking up a sword and go swinging it around. You need to let it flow from the wisdom within. Prajnaparamita, the sutra, is often in the depiction. You can see in this one that the sutras is there's a lotus here, and there's the sutras. The Prajnaparamita sutras are here. So the heart sutra, the emptiness sutras are what Manjushri teaches us. It's not what you think it is, folks. Here, let's see. Here's one Nepal. What Tigan says is in Nepal, it's often with the sword. The depictions in Nepal. You can see that. For Green Gulch Manjushri, and at least we get caught in the he thing. Mayumi Oda, and maybe you'll see we're going to do some Mantabhadra on Thursday. Mayumi Oda did a whole series of taking these bodhisattvas and turning them into women. Yay, Mayumi Oda. So we should use your imagination. And I'm absolutely certain when I'm talking to Manjushri, she's a she, but hey, whatever. So here's Manjushri done by Mayumi Oda. If you can see, you can also find these online, riding a bicycle. And there's a little wild lion dog nipping at her heels. Mayumi's Manjushri. Now, I have I do think about these things, not a whole lot, but some is because Manjushri was one of the earliest bodhisattvas, is usually depicted, and so part of it must be the time of the period that it came out of as a 16-year-old prince. I think that's interesting. How interesting that it's 16-year-old young man. Now, again, maybe historically, way back then, who knows? But it can also mean to become. There's some kind of some youthfulness or beginner's mind to it. I think sometimes. So when you're 16, it does seem to me there is some. You're beginning to come of age into the world and find your way. And there's, of course, ignorance. It seems to me you can do lots of dumb things when you're 16 years old. But it seems to me it's also, if my memory is correct, it's also a time when there's lots of insight, and you write poetry and songs, and there's a youthfulness of a way that you look at the world that hasn't yet become jaded or weighted down by things. They say it reflects a kind of purity and innocence and propensity to see things in a fresh way. So like I said, Manjushri often sits in the center of the meditation hall, excuse me. Because it encourages deep introspection and the awakening of insight. It's like, if I look at this picture of Manjushri in the Green Gulch Meditation Hall, if I look at this Manjushri here on the altar, there's a lightness to this. This is not like sort of, I think sometimes when people go into Zen meditation halls, you think it's kind of grim and you should kind of grind it out. You know, it's like just what are you told? This is terrible. I shouldn't tell you this. Somebody went out to dinner the other night with some old Zen Center friends, and when we get together, you know, these are old Zen Center friends. We of course start telling all these old Zen stories, and they know part of the story, and we know the other. It's like a family, you know, when you start doing it. And so we were talking about Reb Anderson, who is one of the main teachers there, and her memory is that early on in the meditation retreat, he said to people, "Sit still or I'll hurt you." We all sat still, believe me. And there is something to sit still, don't move. But there's also something to is like, don't do it because you're gritting your teeth, or you know, all those reasons we do those kinds of things. It's like, sit still to wake up with and for all beings, because I suppose we could say whatever Reb did or didn't say is the world will hurt you. You know, like being a human being hurts. So sit still in the midst of it and wake up in the midst of the hurt so that you can move more freely and with more nobility and grace and gentleness for yourself and for everybody else. So the thing that Manjushri is, one of the things that Manjushri is most known for is eloquence and skillful use of language. So they is called the sweet sounding one, or the melodious voiced one, and is known for poetry and writing and all the uses of language. So now this has always been a great koan for me, because I grew up in a family where I always knew nobody was telling me the truth. I knew they weren't telling me the truth about anything, not because they were bad people. I just sort of knew nobody was telling the truth about anything. And that's probably why I ended up where I am. So what really is the truth of all of this? But then how do you express it? It's like, to say a true word, or a word that feels congruent all the way through, to me was always just like one of the most amazing things, because my body would know something, a word, or when somebody said something that went all the way through. And I had a pretty sensitive little barometer to just go, turning words, to say a true word that comes from within. And to be able to do that ourselves, to begin to, sometimes I'm amazed when something comes out of me that clearly, I mean, it came out of my mouth, but it's clearly not myself speaking. Like something, somebody in me knows something that I just even am barely beginning to know. And then of course the koan is, well then who knows it, and who is the one who doesn't know it, and what is this process of waking up? I think the whole thing's fascinating. I love it. So here's a little bit more from Taigen, page 116. He calls, he says here, turning words are living words that expose dead words. I suppose it's one of the things too of what's happened to language in our time and in politics, is everybody's just throwing dead words at each other, and we all know it. And every now and then somebody says something true, and it's such a relief. It's like water, but mostly we've forgotten how to say anything true. And there's such a deep yearning, which I think is why there's so much cynicism. I just want to read this to you. You don't have to understand it. I don't understand it either, but it's it gives the flavor of Manjushri's orations that begins with the Buddha questioning Manjushri. The Buddha says, how should one abide in the paramita of wisdom when cultivating it? And Manjushri answered, abiding in no dharma is abiding in the paramita of wisdom. And the Buddha asked Manjushri further, why is abiding in no dharma called abiding in the paramita of wisdom? And Manjushri answered, because to have no notion of abiding is to abide in the paramita of wisdom. And the Buddha asked Manjushri further, if one thus abides in the paramita of wisdom, will her good roots increase or decrease? And Manjushri answers, if one thus abides in the paramitas of wisdom, their good roots will not increase nor decrease, nor will any dharma, nor will the paramita of wisdom increase or decrease in nature or characteristic. World honored one who is thus cultivates the paramita of wisdom will not reject the dharmas of ordinary people. One who thus cultivates the paramita of wisdom will not reject the dharmas of ordinary people, nor cling to the dharmas of saints and sages. Why? Because in the light of the paramita of wisdom, there are no dharmas to cling to or to reject. Moreover, one who cultivates the paramita of wisdom in this way will not delight in nirvana nor detest samsara. It's like you're not going for enlightenment because that's a good place. You're trying to get out of here because this is the bad place. And you're not revering saints and hating stupid people. Why? Because Manjushri realized, because one who abides in the paramita of wisdom realizes that there is no samsara, let alone rejection of it, and no nirvana, let alone attachment to it. World honored one, to see that no dharma arises or ceases is to cultivate the paramita of wisdom. To see that no dharma increases or decreases is to cultivate the paramita of wisdom. To aspire to nothing and to see that nothing can be grasped is to cultivate the paramita of wisdom. Furthermore, if a person, when cultivating the paramita of wisdom, does not see any paramita of wisdom and finds neither any Buddha dharma to grasp nor any dharmas of ordinary people to reject, that person is really cultivating the paramita of wisdom. Here's a little commentary in case you didn't quite get that. In this discussion, Manjushri cuts through our conventional conceptions of and attachments to abiding, increase and decrease, ordinary and holy, nirvana and samsara, arising and ceasing, aspiring and grasping. Just cuts right through it because that's the way we see everything. And the minute we're caught in that, of course, we're all already caught in our stories and our delusions and our likes and our dislikes, and we're human beings. But the paramita of wisdom, when we sit down in the meditation hall and we sit upright and noble with a sense of grace, you can watch it all come and go. It's not like it goes away, but there's more space in it, and you just don't believe it in the same way. Or at least there's moments where you don't quite get caught the same way. Experiencing personally, not just because somebody told you this, and clearly the perfection of wisdom that Manjushri expounds is about seeing through and being liberated from all limited views about these common snares of consciousness. I thought, is Ellen here? Oh, Ellen's here, good. I thought you'd like this. Manjushri is also the bodhisattva of science. Because science, Ellen, I think likes science because the same quality, I mean, science in a pure sense sees through, it doesn't want to lay something on top of it. Investigating the nature of reality to deepen our understanding of the world. Manjushri, vow. It's always with bodhisattvas, it's always vow. I'm going to stop in a minute, but I always have so many things I want to say, and then there's never enough time. I want to tell you about all my friends. No, but I want you to know that Manjushri often shows up in unexpected forms with a playfulness and a creative, youthful energy, and takes on humble disguises to demonstrate non-attachment to appearances and conventions. So there's stories which I'm not going to have time to tell you now about, it's like that. I think they're Jesus stories, like about that. Maybe I don't know. So I don't know enough about Jesus to say anything, but the kind of story where you think it's just a beggar and that's just, it's like you write that person off and then all of a sudden it transforms and it's Manjushri. It's like the story is don't write anybody off. See through it, look through it. Because Manjushri will surprise you with playfulness and creativity. I mean, it might even be you, or it might even be the most despicable or despised parts of yourself. Who knows? Okay, so here's my question. You can do whatever you want with this. I mean, make